At some point in our evolutionary history, humans began to use psychoactive drugs. People viewed these substances as a source of the sacred and spiritual realms. Generally, they were used in rituals for improving health and spirituality. At another point in our history, we found out that these kind of substances can induce a state which we call addiction. So during the 20th century, many governments across the world initially responded to the use of recreational drugs by banning them and making their use, supply, or trade a criminal offense. I mean, how can you forget this great speech?
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
The Hawks have seized R500 million worth of drugs at Durban Harbour.
5 Sydney men are in custody, accused of importing almost $50 million of cocaine.
Newly released images tonight of a massive drug bust at sea, a narco sub trying to get to the U.S. The Coast Guard reporting they have intercepted the sub in the Pacific Ocean.
After this, we discovered that different food could be addictive like any fatty and sweet taste food.
Doctors claim you can actually get hooked on food, and that sugary processed foods can work on your brain like a drug.
Startling new insight into the addictive power of sugary, salty, and fatty foods. Would you believe doctors have found that cravings for junk food may be as strong as an addiction to heroin or cocaine?
After a while, we found that we don't need a substance to become an addict, and some behaviors such as gambling and sex can be addictive. So we discovered behavioral addiction. With improving technology and emerging of social media and video games, we categorize impulsive use of these technologies as behavioral addiction. And many people try to inform us about the detrimental effect of the internet and social media, and they compare them with cocaine and meth. But some people say they are not comparable and their nature is entirely different.
The marketers, app developers, and most of all journalists need to stop using the word addiction when they're talking about iPhones, Candy Crush Saga, or cheeseburgers.
So what's the deal here? I'm going to compare these two by taking cocaine and social media as an example to see if we can make a conclusion out of this. Let's start with this. This is coca, which was respected as magical and sacred, and chewing a mouthful of coca leaves could give you the ability to overcome fatigue, hunger, and pain during work. The symptoms starts in a few minutes with an intense anesthetic effect on the mucus around the bulb, which also affects the cheeks, throat, and tongue. So they were used to alleviate many pains such as headache, toothache, and intestinal cramps. The use of this plant can be traced back to 7,000 years ago, and now it is prohibited around the world because of this: cocaine. Cocaine is a tropane alkaloid that extracted from the coca leaves with a simple acid-based extraction technique. It can be used by nasal insufflation or injected directly into the vein, and after entering the central nervous system, it can increase alertness, feeling of well-being and euphoria. Since cocaine is a powerfully addictive substance, gradually, the sacred coca leaves developed into an evil that bent on ruining humans' lives. In 1952, the World Health Organization defined and treated coca chewing as an addiction. 10 years later, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs put coca leaf as a substance liable for abuse in Schedule 1. But based on the Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous People, they can practice, develop, and teach their spiritual and religious traditions. This reflects a complete contradiction in international law regarding the legal status of the traditional use of coca. So in South American countries, the cultivation and sale of coca leaf products, except the cocaine form, are legal, and chewing them and drinking coca tea considered completely normal behaviors in these countries. To this day, there's still a debate about whether coca leaf is addictive or not, and many people claim that chewing coca is defined as a habit rather than addiction. The reason behind this is that they claim that coca leaf is a natural product, and the amount of cocaine in the coca leaf is quite low. So they believe that you can get addicted to chewing coca leaves or drinking coca tea. That brings a question to mind that how we can judge that something is addictive or not. The more I read about this, the more I realize that this is the start of addiction theories. That's the reward circuitry in our central nervous system, which we have been focused on in the past couple of years. There's a neural pathways in the brain that we call mesolimbic pathway or reward pathway, which I explained completely in my previous video. But long story short, reaching the electric signals to the end of the axon terminals of the dopaminergic neurons in the reward system causes the releasing of dopamine into the synaptic cleft. Dopamine inserts its effect by binding to dopamine receptors on the postsynaptic neurons. This circuitry reinforces behavior, so you want to do the same behavior over and over again. It's not necessarily related to enjoying, but rather it's more related to wanting. So in the case of social media, when you put a picture of yours on Instagram, if you get a lot of likes and attention, you get a dopamine hit in your reward circuitry and it creates a positive reinforcement in your behavior. So you want to do the same behavior more to get more reward and attention.
Of course, in the last decade or so, new technology has allowed more and more people to have this powerful feeling of getting attention.
So the similarity between cocaine and social media is that both of them increase dopamine level and increase the activity of the reward circuitry. So the coca chewing defender's argument is that since the percentage of cocaine in the coca leaf is very low, the dopamine that releases in the reward circuitry is not enough to make you addicted. But that's a very familiar argument when you want to compare the cocaine addiction and social media addiction.
And I just want you to get a feel for how dramatic the differences are between that little blip of dopamine that you get for eating a cheeseburger for the first time or predicting a cheeseburger versus taking one of these drugs. Now, this is dopamine recorded in rats who are taking very high doses of drugs.
So where exactly we draw the line for addiction? In what amount of dopamine some substance or behavior can be addictive? Social media increased dopamine with a natural reward, but cocaine does that with a different strategy. There's a pump on the presynaptic neuron that reuptakes the dopamine from the synaptic cleft, which you call it dopamine transporter. It has been shown that cocaine directly blocks the dopamine transporter and reduces the transport of dopamine into the presynaptic axon terminal. So it is rewarding because it increases the dopamine in the reward pathway. And more rewards mean more positive reinforcement, more drug administration and drug-seeking behavior. But here's an interesting idea. What happens if we remove the dopamine transporter? So we should expect that no dopamine transporter, no sites of action for cocaine, and the animal should stop self-administrating the cocaine. But that's not what happened in mice. If we genetically modify addicted mice to cocaine that don't have dopamine transporter, they're still craving and self-administrating the cocaine. So besides dopamine, other factors should be involved. In another study, in addition to the dopamine transporter, another transporter in different neurons called the serotonin transporter was knocked out. The double knocked out mice which don't have both dopamine and serotonin transporter stop self-administrating the cocaine. So blocking dopamine transporter isn't enough for the reinforcing effect of cocaine, and the dopamine level isn't sufficient to make any assessment about how much a drug can be addictive. So how we can even make a judgment about the addictive properties of a certain substance or behavior? But I think this addiction controversy likely stems from the fact that the concept itself is rather difficult to define. Let me explain. At some point in life, some of us may try alcohol and drugs like cocaine for the first time, which obviously the reward circuitry gets active and a lot of dopamine is released to the nucleus accumbens, and you feel great. So it creates a powerful positive reinforcers for you to use the drug again. Somehow, drug use becomes a habit in your life like other habits that we have, and sometimes people impulsively use the drug because of the good feeling of the drug. Since the reward circuitry has been active for a while because of the repetition use of the drug, the homeostasis system of the body kicks in, which decreases the activation of the reward circuitry by reducing the dopamine receptors on the postsynaptic neurons. We call this condition tolerance, and it makes the current behavior, which is drug use, less fun and less rewarding. At this point, something weird happens, which we call it anti-reward system. Some people increase the amount of the drugs to get the same feeling every time, and it leads to produce the negative and withdrawal effect of the drug, such as emotional pain, sleep disturbance, stress, and anxiety. Now, the drug use becomes compulsive, and you use the drug not because of the positive reinforcement and seeking the reward, but because of the negative reinforcement and escaping the punishment. In this state, individuals take drugs no longer to feel high, but just to feel right. So, in this model, we don't know exactly where addiction happens. For example, based on Roy Wise's opinions, addiction happens when you start using the drug regularly and predictably. But for George F. Koop, the devil is in dysphoria and the negative effect experienced in absence of the drug. So we don't know how to define addiction. It simply means different things to different people. I mean, how can we talk about something that we don't even know the exact definition of? And now we face this. There are a lot of controversies about defining behavioral addictions because we are trying to compare them with substance abuse like cocaine. Obviously, there are some differences between them, but as Mark Griffiths once wrote, the behavioral addiction and substance addiction should be defined by their similarities, not their dissimilarities. I completely agree with this because both cocaine and social media involve similar neural circuits in our brain, and we can use this model for behavioral addiction too. But I think we're making a big mistake here, and we're trying to copy the same approach that we had in substance abuse disorder. In substance abuse disorder, we started a war on drugs, we criminalized the addiction, and we treated addicts the same way for the last decades. We punished them, we shamed them, we put them in prison, and we treat them like criminals. And here in behavioral addiction, we are trying to do the same. We treated the internet, social media, and video games like cocaine and heroin. We started blaming dopamine and encouraging our young generation to do dopamine detox or dopamine fasting. And we already started a war with technology and social media. Don't get me wrong, I think it's necessary to increase awareness about cocaine, meth, and social media and how they can affect our brain and how they can be detrimental to our health. But I think we focus too much on this side of the model. What about this side? An accident doesn't happen when you hit another car, but it happens 300 feet before that when you have a lot of stress, depression, anxiety, and you have a poor coping skills. I don't know why we forget all the time that using cocaine or social media are conditioned learning at their core. I don't know why when we want to talk about addiction, we just see the researches related to brain chemistry and we just neglect the environmental role in using cocaine or social media. Maybe it's us. Maybe addiction is not a popular disease that we thought. Maybe it is the consequence of our inability to teach our children how to cope with emotional pain, and they discover how to cope with those by drugs, food, shopping, or even social media. Maybe addiction is proof of our failure as a society. I think we should learn from our mistakes and establish a support system for our loved ones before it's too late, to help them cope in a better way, not by cocaine or social media.